On March 27, 2026, Iran struck Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Ground-level photos confirmed it. One of the United States Air Force's E-3 Sentry Airborne Warning and Control System aircraft, an Airbu Ace, the flying radar, the eye in the sky, the irreplaceable nerve center of American air power projection, was completely destroyed. Gone. Incinerated on the tarmac of a base that was supposed to be beyond Iran's reach. This was not just any aircraft. The E-3 is the most high-value support aircraft in the entire United States Armed Forces. And the Iranian attack appears to have precisely targeted its most critical component, the tail section where the rotating radar dome sits. Serial number 81,005 from the 557 Air Control Wing, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. Not a lucky hit. A precise, intelligent, calculated strike, and it did not stop there. Alongside the E-3, Iranian attacks on Prince Sultan Air Base destroyed at least 3 KC-135 Stratanker airborne refueling aircraft at approximately $53 million each. At least 10 American casualties were reported at the base from this strike alone. Iran's military spokesperson Ebrahim Zalfagari confirmed the attack destroyed 1 refueling aircraft, while 3 others were put out of service. Iranian satellite imagery, released through Press TV and corroborated by China's Vision, showed multiple aircraft destroyed across the base's taxiways. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Yanis, this is just one base, one plane. This is isolated. This is manageable. This is recoverable? No, it is not. The E-3 will be particularly challenging to replace. Funding to produce the Air Force's first post-Cold War airborne early warning system, the E-7 Wedgetail, was only approved in early March 2026, and a long production queue means no meaningful replacement until the 2030s. The 2030s, we're talking about a capability gap that spans nearly a decade. America has just lost the commander of its airspace management, not metaphorically, literally, and there is no substitute waiting in the hangar. John Phillips, a British military safety and security advisor, told Al Jazeera that the loss of an ADOS disrupts the entire air campaign's command and control by creating battle space awareness gaps. AGB planes provide critical airborne early warning, fighter direction, and real-time data linking for strikes. Their lost forces' reliance on ground radars. And here is the brutal irony. Iran had already struck the radar bases for US THAAD missile defense systems in Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia in early March, destroying at least one of them. First, they blinded the ground. Now they blinded the sky. This is asymmetric warfare executed with a sophistication that Washington's strategists did not anticipate, or refused to anticipate, which is worse. Iran's ability to precisely target the E-3 reflects a sophisticated intelligence-gathering effort. Satellite imagery from China remains available to Iran, and Russia is believed to be supplying additional imagery. Traditional human intelligence methods cannot be ruled out either. The Americans dispersed their aircraft across taxiways to minimize damage. Iran found them anyway. Let that sink in. The world's most expensive military, with the most advanced surveillance apparatus in human history, scattered its aircraft to survive, and Iran, operating under severe economic sanctions. Under weeks of bombardment, having lost its supreme leader and much of its top military brass, still found those planes and destroyed them. This attack has renewed urgent debate over the lack of hardened aircraft shelters at US bases in the Middle East. The Pentagon has been slow to invest in hardened infrastructure, despite clear evidence from recent conflicts that aircraft on the ground face serious risks. The Pentagon was slow. Of course it was slow, because the people running this war, let us be honest about what this is, a war, not an excursion, not major combat operations. A war. These people were not thinking about hardened shelters. They were thinking about a spectacle. They wanted the B-2 bombers. They wanted the Tomahawks. They wanted the footage of Tehran in flames that would play well on Fox News and at Republican fundraiser dinners. And speaking of fundraiser dinners, on the very evening of March 25th, as this catastrophe unfolded across the region, Donald Trump stood at the National Republican Congressional Committee's annual President's Dinner and told members of Congress that Iran wants to make a deal so badly. But they're afraid to say it because they figure they'll be killed by their own people. They're also afraid they'll be killed by us. I want you to read that again. The President of the United States, at a fundraising gala for his political party, spoke about Iran's desire for a deal. Simultaneously, Iran was firing ballistic missiles and drones into Saudi Arabia, destroying American aircraft, wounding American soldiers, demonstrating conclusively that it has neither surrendered nor capitulated nor even slowed down. This is not confidence. This is panic wearing a dinner jacket. Trump is desperate to sell the story that the Islamic Republic is ready to end the war. But there is no public sign yet from Tehran that it is poised to help him walk back a crisis that he triggered by obliterating his own previous diplomatic effort nearly 4 weeks ago. This is the extraordinary thing, the thing that should haunt every person who values rational governance, evidence-based decision-making, or simple honesty. The launch of this war came as Washington and Tehran were scheduled to meet for another round of talks that had already been started. Before the war, their Omani mediator said a deal was within reach. A deal within reach. And Trump launched Operation Epic Fury anyway. The US and Israeli assertion that Tehran was on the verge of making a nuclear bomb was not backed up by the United Nations nuclear watchdog. U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard herself told Congress that Iran was not in a position to make an atomic bomb. So let us be absolutely clear about what happened on February 28, 2026. The United States and Israel launched a war of choice. Their own intelligence chief confirmed there was no imminent nuclear threat. Against a country that was at the negotiating table, against a country whose mediator had just announced a breakthrough, and in doing so they ignited a conflict that has now, 1 month later, claimed lives across the region, sent oil prices above $100 per barrel, blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, threatened a global recession, and produced images of American warplanes burning on Saudi tarmac. And Trump calls it going great. Observers have warned that the war appears to have entered a phase of attrition that strategically favors Iran. Even U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard acknowledged that the regime remains intact but largely degraded. Intact. After weeks of B-2 bombers, Tomahawk missiles, F-35s, and the deaths of Iran's supreme leader and countless officials, intact. Trump in recent days has sought to force Iran into a quick deal, raising the specter of strikes on critical infrastructure and a potential ground invasion to convince the regime to give in. But should those threats fail, his allies worry it could set the stage for an even more unpredictable and potentially destabilizing endgame, his own allies. Worried, in private, while in public they applaud. A key group of House Republicans grew increasingly wary of the war after a briefing with Department of Defense officials left some unsatisfied with what they were told about the objectives and length of the war effort. Cracks are emerging among congressional Republicans as lawmakers grow increasingly skeptical about spending billions of dollars to prolong the conflict. Congressional officials said the briefers could not provide details about deploying U.S. troops to Iran, but would not rule it out. There was no plan, no strategy, no endgame shared, and they didn't give any answers. It's unclear if there isn't a plan or if there is a plan and they wouldn't share it with members. One congressional official said, no plan, no strategy, no endgame. 1 month into a war, with American planes burning on foreign soil, Trump himself has said the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. J.D. Vance called it fundamentally fake. They launched this war without congressional authorization, without a declaration of war, and when called to account, they declared the mechanisms of democratic accountability to be invalid. This is not an aberration. This is the logic of late-stage imperial capitalism playing itself out in real time. The American military-industrial complex, and I use that term precisely as Eisenhower intended it, as a warning that was never heeded, has spent decades building the most expensive weapon systems in human history. It has built aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, TS systems, E-3 and OACS. It has spent trillions. And now Iranian strikes on military bases across the Middle East have caused damage estimated at $800 million, according to a BBC and CS analysis, while Iran has also essentially blocked the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil and gas passes, sending oil prices above $100 per barrel. $800 million in damages, Hormuz blockaded, oil prices surging, global supply chains disrupted. And for what? A Reuters Ipsos poll showed 61% disapproval of the war compared with 35% approval. 61% of Americans oppose this war. They oppose the war that has no plan, that destroyed a diplomatic breakthrough, that is burning American aircraft and wounding American soldiers and threatening to drag the global economy into recession. Arab allies urged Trump not to leave behind an even more dangerous Iranian regime, while some in the Geo press him to declare victory and get out before voters saw further on his presidency. Declare victory and get out. That is the serious strategic conversation happening in the corridors of Washington right now. Not how do we achieve our objectives, not how do we build regional stability, declare victory and get out. The E-3 Sentry burns at Prince Sultan Air Base. Multiple KC-135 Stratotankers have been damaged or destroyed across the region. MQ-9 Reaper drones have been shot down over Iran. The U.S. aerial refueling fleet faces growing strain from Iranian strikes across multiple bases, limiting the ability to conduct sustained fighter operations. The sinews of American air power, the tankers that make long-range operations possible, the radar platforms that make those operations coherent, are being systematically, methodically, intelligently targeted and degraded. Iran is not winning this war in the conventional sense. It has lost its supreme leader. Its cities have been struck. Its infrastructure bears wounds. But Iran is doing something strategically more significant. It is demonstrating that the United States military, the most expensive in human history, can be blood. It can be surprised. It can be made to look foolish, reactive, confused, leaderless. And that revelation, that demonstration, has a cost that cannot be measured in dollars or aircraft. It is a cost measured in credibility, in deterrence. In the calculations being made right now in Beijing, in Moscow, in Pyongyang, in every capital where someone is watching an American AWS burn and drawing their own conclusions about what that means. I began my political life as an economist studying game theory, studying the logic of rational actors and irrational ones, studying what happens when the most powerful player at the table confuses the appearance of strength with actual strength. What we are witnessing today in the skies above Saudi Arabia, in the corridors of a confused White House, in the burning fuselage of an E3 Sentry that cannot be replaced until the 2030s, what we are witnessing is exactly that confusion. Power without wisdom is not strength. It is accelerated decay. The empire is not collapsing. Empires rarely collapse in a single moment. They bleed slowly, expensively, stupidly. And the tragedy, the genuine, irreversible tragedy, is that ordinary people pay for it. The American soldiers wounded in Saudi Arabia. The Iranian civilians under bombardment. The global south already reeling from $100 barrel of oil. The seafarers stranded in the Strait of Hormuz. They all pay. While Trump gives dinner speeches. While the aircraft burns. Wake up.